tell me how many hurdles really came across the way.
Exactly.
You might be too proud to say so, but there was a ton of hurdles that came across the way.
There really should be 2 realtors on every deal. There really should be,
or one,
or
if
at least
working.
one. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I've dealt with that before, where the buyer didn't have a real estate agent. They went with the listing agent, and depending on the relationship or the attitude of the listing agent, it can make a big difference in how you negotiate.
Oh, sure. Well, that's a good point. I want to talk about that real quick because, I've heard of buyers going to listing agents and having a hell of a time, a horrible time. But you got to know something, okay? A lot of people want to go to the listing agent because they feel, and I can't stand when people say this because it makes real estate agents look like toll takers. And I got to say, the real true full-time professionals are not toll takers. These people are working. They're skilled. They know what they're doing. They're experienced. They've been through it all. These are people you want on your side, okay? And when you have people that look at you like, oh, you're just collecting a fee for doing nothing, they don't understand the process. And it's very frustrating because they go to work for 40 hours. Now, let's say if they're managing a restaurant, managing a retail store, or let's just say if they're, like an analyst or whatever, that's hard work too. Imagine, working 40, 50 hours and somebody saying, oh, we're going to take half of your pay, right? It's
almost as if they're cutting a corner to try to save somebody some money, but the money that's involved, the minimal amount that's involved, it will ruin the deal, and it will not go smoothly at all. I've seen it too many times.
Yeah, I mean, so there's 2 different ways this can go down, right? There's the professional real estate agent, the one that knows what she's doing, okay, or he's doing, is going to sit the buyers down, going to sit the sellers down and say, listen, okay, depending on, there's a few different ways this can go down. Now, if the listing agent, the person selling the house, okay, if they've been working with this buyer, if they've been taking the buyer around, showing them houses, actually, physically taking them out and working with that buyer, right then and there, they should have a buyer's agreement with that buyer that says that they're the designated client representative, okay? They have the same agreement with the seller saying that they're the designated client representative. Now, that's a fiduciary relationship, okay? Such meaning, as you all know, that realtor or that real estate agent, they must put that client's needs ahead of theirs. They must do, right?
100%.
What's always in that client's best interest. Now, when you have that buyer that you've been designated client representative of and the seller who you're the designated client representative of, when you have them come together, you can no longer represent both. It's a conflict of interest, okay? Now, so what people want to do is at that point, you can take a step back and you can be the transaction facilitator, which is quite all right, which is completely ethical, which is completely fine because you've hired that agent, okay, which hopefully knows what they're doing. And again, a lot of them do. Some of them may not, but hopefully they've got good coaching. Keep in mind there's a lot of new agents out there. But anyways, that person can't negotiate the transaction for you if they're the buyer. They can't negotiate it for you if they're the seller. They can't go back and forth and tell the other party about your personal interests. They could lose their license. They could get fined. They could, you could sue them. So all that stuff is off the table, of course, which is a good thing for the consumers. And everything we do is obviously for the consumers. So point being, okay, is that if you have a dual transaction facilitator, okay, that person can't represent either party, and that person has to somehow make that transaction work, okay? So it's kind of a gray area. You want to make sure that the person doing that is obviously a trusted professional and somebody that has advised you before that transaction started about the market, that educated you. So when you're in the middle of negotiating with that seller, because you're working directly with that sellers, you're working directly with that buyer, pretty much. And the real estate agent is passing the paperwork back and forth, making it happen, doing the 183 steps it takes to close the house, working with the closing attorney, working with the appraiser, the mortgage broker, got the inspector, everybody else, making sure that this thing goes together. So that's one. And number two, what you can do if you're, the listing agent, you're working for the seller. Again, your job, by the way, was to pull in a buyer to sell the house. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with that at all. Okay, it's completely, again, as long as it's handled correctly, like anything in business, it's completely ethical. It's completely right. So if you're representing that buyer as a designated client representative and a lead calls you off of Zillow or comes into an open house, now you don't represent that buyer, and you got to tell that buyer, look, I don't represent you. I'm the transaction facilitator for you. Okay. So, long story short, you represent the seller and you can negotiate against the buyer that doesn't have an agent for the seller. Okay, so you want to make sure that your relationship as a real estate professional is fully disclosed to these buyers, to these sellers, and they should know exactly where they are at all these times. Okay, so and if you're in the middle, and I'm talking to you, the listeners, if you're in the middle of a real estate transaction, I'm sure you're going through the same thing. I mean, realtors are very good at this, telling you it's called the Rhode Island Mandatory Real Estate Relationship Disclosure Form. Huge name. And they go through this and they let you know exactly what their representation for you is or isn't. Okay?